I'm Chair of the Winchester Board of Health. It's March 28th, 2022, and I call this regular scheduled meeting to order. Our agenda for today is 1, continued consideration of ongoing COVID response, 2, old business, 3, public comment, and 4, adjournment. If it's agreeable to my colleagues, I'd like to move old business forward since the last meeting we discussed but did not vote on our next meeting dates. So we consider meeting every second and fourth Monday of each month for April and May, and then possibly changing that to 1 meeting a month during the summer. So I'm looking for a motion that our next meetings will be held on 4/11, 4/25, 5/9, and 5/23 at 4:30 p.m. Say so moved.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, you move it and then I'll join in.
I move that those dates be approved as a future meeting times.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote, all in agreement? Sorry.
Could you discuss for 1 minute?
Oh, I do apologize. Yes, of course we can.
Sorry, if I can just.
Yes,
April
yes.
11th is a tech seminar.
At
So
the
it's
time?
to the draft.
Absolutely. What time is the tech seminar?
Maybe 7, I think it's 7 o'clock.
I don't think there's a.
And then there's also a vaccination clinic as well we're holding from 4:30 to 6. So I will be here.
Vaccination clinic is definitely conflict. We definitely want you there and here. So what should we propose?
I think it's important for us to meet one more time before April break, just to stay on sort of an every 2-week schedule.
We do it earlier?
Can do it without me.
It's up to you whether we can meet without saying this is rally fine with me. Maureen, if you want to just find another date, we could do that too.
I'm open to anything. The context of what we'll be meeting about would be important to know whether or not Jen would be here. So,
I think it's always good to have Jen here. That's the thing, is that I'd rather have her here.
yeah,
So I would rather potentially think about moving it if either I couldn't do earlier in that day and obviously couldn't do later. So we could either do it another day that week or.
What about Tuesday of that week? Work for everybody. For 12. I am open.
4:12 time with me.
So why don't we?
Then that works for you, correct?
I believe
Yep.
so.
Does it work for you, Jen? Most importantly,
4:30 and 4:12.
4:30. Because what time do you work till?
Yeah, Tuesdays we don't.
Yeah.
So
Tuesdays is okay with you, correct?
I'm just looking. Hold on, sorry. I could even do earlier in the afternoon if that would be better for you, Jen.
Yeah, I mean, I can be flexible. So
I'm open. Anytime's fine.
4 o'clock on 4/12.
4 o'clock on 4/12. So I will amend my motion then, which is the dates will be 4/12, 4/25. That you listed in May that I announced.
Forgot the. Okay, so I'm looking for a motion that our next meetings will be held on 4/12 at 4 o'clock, 4/25, 5/9, and 5/23 at 4:30.
All right, so the motion that I amend is for meetings on 4/12 at 4 p.m., 4/25 at 4:30 p.m., 5/9 at 4:30 p.m., and 5/23 at 4:30 p.m.
Okay.
All in agreement?
Aye.
Aye.
So for those folks listening, I think we have to say it just with the I, just until I. Thank you. All right. Okay, moving on to our next order of business. It's a continued consideration of ongoing COVID response. So there's a lot of issues that we as a board need to address. Today we're here to have an open discussion among Board of Health members to address COVID. So I'd like to start by saying that we have been receiving a large amount of public input. I want to acknowledge that via email and in our hybrid meetings. And we are all carefully reading and listening to all the material that's coming in. I want to note that currently we are in a very good spot here in Winchester. We have a high vaccination rate. We have good communications between the health director and schools, the hospitals, the state, and other stakeholders. We have improved ventilation in many of our public buildings. And I want to give credit where credit is due. Thank you, Ms. Pimentel. Thank you, Ms. Murphy, and for the previous board members, all of whom have been, and staff members who've been working overtime for 2 years, 1 year, to get all of this set up. So a great deal of credit is due already for where we are today. We also have a far greater community knowledge and understanding of the pandemic today than we ever did before, and that's in our favor. We're also in a relatively quiet period for COVID in Winchester at this time, which gives us a little bit of time to consider how we would like to choose when we do respond should conditions change, while remaining vigilant. I personally do not believe we need a mask mandate in Winchester at this time. I came before this body and the school committee a few weeks ago and urged each of those bodies to lift the mask mandate. I believed it then, I believe it now. None of us have had any conversation prior to last week's meeting or to this week's meeting, and any discussion of any possible mask mandate would have to be posted by the town with 48 hours notice. That's standard protocol. So our discussion today is not focused on anything about that. Our discussion today is focused on clarifying how local COVID metrics are gathered and clarifying what the current masking situation is here in Winchester. At our last meeting, our health director updated us on COVID metrics townwide, and today Ms. Pimentel is going to give us a report on her work over the past year with the schools. Before we start with Ms. Pimentel's report, I'd like to invite each member of the board to make any comments you would like to.
What am I presenting?
When we left off last week, you said you would talk a little bit about your involvement with the schools. You had gone out and were working.
No, what actually happened was Greg said to me, could we meet? And Jen said she would set up a meeting with him to discuss how the data. I'm happy to speak, but I did not present anything, nor did you. I don't have anything to present, nor did you ask me to present anything.
Okay,
so I'm a little taken aback.
My apologies. Then I had understood that you felt comfortable talking about the last year's work.
Oh, of course, I feel comfortable off the cuff speaking of the last year's work, but I didn't present or put anything together, and it's a little shocking to be put on the spot in the middle of an open meeting.
My apologies. I had understood that you wanted to give a report, so no worries. We'll just start.
Hold on, Jen, was that your understanding?
I don't recall that when we were supposed to have.
Anything prepared or anything to speak about, right? Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
There was no expectation. I think the point was to have a discussion about, just again, what has been going on.
Oh yeah, happily.
Just I think in more global sense, as opposed to
Yeah.
sort of a specifics. As was mentioned, I did set up, thanks to Jen, a meeting tomorrow with the school nursing leads for myself to learn about
Great.
sort of where the school dashboard is and some of the
Yeah.
questions that I might have about that. But I think more broadly,
Sure.
just I think a discussion about how the Board of Health has worked with the schools, and sort of where we think the board could be helpful to the schools as we're sort of thinking moving forward. It's one of the areas that I want to sort of talk about.
Okay, so just to clarify a couple of different things, because I think sometimes people intersect these things.
Sure.
The Board of Health is the Board of Health. The Department of Public Health liaises with the schools.
Mhm.
I separately, when COVID hit, was a substitute school nurse and was a contract tracer for the town because I just felt like I should dive in and help in any way I could. So my information on those aspects of things come outside of the Board of Health. They're not because of my
Okay.
engagement with the Board of Health. So all of my volunteer work and all of my substitute and all that sort of stuff was in response of me feeling like I needed to do something even prior to being on this board. So I'm happy to speak about any of that, but it would be outside of the scope of what I did on the Board of Health.
Mhm.
Jen is our liaison to the schools and should be the liaison to the schools. So that's just sort of to get everybody up to speed as to how that works.
Thank you. And,
Yeah.
and again, I apologize.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, no,
I just
I'm happy to put
wanted
any reports and any data. Trust me, I have it all, but anything you ever want put together, just, and I'm happy to speak about how the data is collected and everything else. I just, Jen is obviously the expert on this and I would not want to sort of usurp her space.
Well understood. So I think what might be useful then, if I share my screen, I'd just like to present a couple of slides here on where we are currently, and then just open up to my colleagues, whatever you'd like to discuss. So let's see if I hit this. Looks like it's visible. So the purpose of what I'm saying here now is just to clarify for all of us, so we're all on the same page about where we are actually at this time in Winchester. People use different terminology to talk about where we are, you know, optional or whatever. So it's technically called a face mask advisory. Why wouldn't that be maybe that's two different things. Okay, so what does a face mask advisory mean? On 2/17/22, the Board of Health voted unanimously to rescind the mask mandate for indoor public spaces. So currently, that means that Winchester defaults to following the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. It's called a mask advisory. And I want to call out 3 highlights of that longer document. So we have defaulted to this mask advisory for the state of Massachusetts. And the number one piece that the state stresses is get vaccinated. To quote from the document, stay up to date on COVID vaccinations, including when eligible for booster doses. Vaccination remains the most effective protection against serious illness, hospitalization, and death. The second thing I'd like to highlight from the advisory is to wear a mask if you have certain risks. And again, quoting, a person who is fully vaccinated should wear a mask when indoors and not in your own home. If you have a weakened immune system or are at increased risk because of your age or an underlying medical condition, or if someone in your household has a weakened immune system, is at increased risk, or is unvaccinated. The third highlight is that you should wear a mask if you are unvaccinated. A person who is not fully vaccinated should continue to wear a mask to help prevent spreading COVID-19 to other people. So that's it. And I will now stop sharing there.
The only caveat I would add to that is you're also supposed to wear a mask 5 days after coming out of isolation for quarantine from having COVID.
Thank you, yes. So I just wanted to put that out because sometimes people think of this as a light switch. It's either on or off. Everybody has their masks on and it's mandatory, or no one needs to wear a mask. And instead, the actual advisory is a little bit more nuanced to that. It's optional, but there are advisories for people with certain risk conditions. So that's really all I wanted to put out before I open it up now to my colleagues for any further discussion about how we can go about responding should situations change, or any other comments that you'd like to make regarding COVID. Dr. Swift.
So thanks, Ruth, for that update, and thanks, Maureen, for sort of clarifying a little bit about the relationship between the Board of Health and the schools. I think fundamentally, the Board of Health does have a responsibility to make sure that we are both dealing with current day-to-day and week-to-week variability in terms of the COVID pandemic response. But I think we also are charged with setting policy or being aware of policy about future preparedness. That's clearly in the charter of the Board of Health, and that includes preparedness related to both the town as well as other parts of town. And I think the schools are a big part of that. And we're hearing a lot from the community about concerns related to schools, both in terms of perhaps maybe not call them surges, but some rises in case reporting numbers that have been seen through the self-report system that have spurred some people in the community to be concerned that maybe we're on the beginning end of a new wave, maybe in the schools. But also concerning that our response may be to consider the reinstatement of a mask mandate. And I wanted to first say that, again, nowhere have I ever said that I would unilaterally reinstate a mask mandate. And I've received messages from multiple members of the community saying that they were told or they were informed that my agenda was to reinstate a mask mandate. And I want to be very clear on record that that's not my agenda, and that never has been my agenda to reinstate a mask mandate, neither in town nor in the school system. And the fact that we're getting messages from the greater community, many of whom are people that are not even in the town of Winchester, sending me and others on the board, you've been on all of them, the discussions around not, really voicing opinions strongly against mask mandates, period. But then again, citing these, which are often unproven reasons for no masks. And I think I take umbrage at the fact that people are writing to us and saying that masks are depriving children of oxygen or depriving children of X, Y, or Z, things that they may be reading in other places. And there's probably nuance to all of this, but I think as a pediatrician and a pulmonologist, I know full well that it doesn't reduce child's oxygen level. And so to get those kind of messages from people that don't even live in town, is a little bit of an unusual situation. And I hope that we can recognize that we can't respond directly to these kind of messages coming from communities, particularly when they're outside of Winchester. And I think it is our responsibility to sort of look beyond those comments and think about what is needed for our town and for the parents in our town, the school staff that are concerned about some of the things that may be happening, as well as I think people in town more broadly that may be hearing the news about the new variant, which I know we brought up briefly last week, around sort of whether it would lead to another surge or not. And I think the jury's still out. And I think we are thankful that the state is providing us metrics and that Jen is able to report on these metrics as a townwide. I think there still is a little bit of a hole in the school reporting because of the way that it's been set up. And that's why I'm trying to learn a little bit more about it. Yeah. Because I think we can, as a Board of Health, work with the school department to think about improving the way that they're either reporting the data and or messaging out the data. Because I think some of the challenges when you have data that is not well understood by even people who really understand data more, it's hard to explain it to an average person out in the community. I think it's our job to work with the school to do that. So I would like to see a greater collaboration, as I said, with the school department to do that. I think the first thing is really about just understanding data. So that's really where I'm starting at, because fundamentally, and I've learned this for many years in my other professions, bad data is worse than no data. And if we're putting out data as a town, regardless of whether it's coming from the school department or the Board of Health or the health department, we need to be able to feel confident explaining that data. And I think that's why I want to learn more about where that data is coming from, what the limitations of self-report are. And one of my big questions is understanding the pool testing program and how we might want to strengthen that, because I think one of the ways to actually improve and think about policy is to think about pool testing or other mitigation measures that are not masking. It's really about sort of how do we identify cases? Are we really getting the best case identification that we can? Why are people opting in or out of pool testing in schools in particular, which is sort of been a flashpoint? And then lastly, thinking about our vaccinations and our vaccination clinics and our boosters that the health department is doing, and really thinking about how do we encourage that? We know that the FDA is probably going to recommend this week that a 4th booster shot for people 50 and over. We're sort of already falling behind in the town and sort of boosting people. Like, we're pretty good with 1st and 2nd doses. We're not so good with the booster doses, particularly in the 20 to 50-year-old age groups, better in the older populations. But I think once they get to sort of the 4th shot, we're going to really need to think about access. And I think through whether we want to be really supporting more efforts around vaccinations and boosters. So again, for me, it's not about thinking about masks alone. And I think when our discussions get reduced to mask or no mask, it takes away all of our collective need and desire to help the community prepare for the future. And so I think really the point is, for me, is about information gathering, learning and being reactive to the data and proactive in terms of understanding what the mitigation plan should be and the strategy should be, and working with the schools for not necessarily even just for the spring, but for the fall, because we all hope there will not be another surge. But I'd rather that we think about policies together with the school system. And that's really why I'm thinking about trying to meet with all these people and learn. And that's really, I think, the most important role that we can serve in terms of setting policy, because we can set policy that the school can help implement. It's not that the school can only implement policies that we can't get involved in. There absolutely, we can say and be pretty strong in our language about what we want the schools to be doing.
Yeah, the only question I have to that is, so other than what we've done, which is widely make vaccine available, widely make boosters available, more booster clinics, we've gone into the schools to immunize children. That's all sort of had a drop off at this point. The last clinic we had, I think there was only a couple kids that signed up for the in-school clinics. Plan to go back out to the schools. Testing in the schools, home testing kits, PCR testing at town hall multiple times per week, even more when needed. So do you have other ideas of things we can implement other than that? Because I feel like Jen has done an amazing job setting up a huge
Maureen, I
response.
think that's actually true. I think what is that we've all had COVID fatigue, and I think it's going to be very easy to let those things slip off as sort of as the school year is waning and the mask mandates went away. People, I think, are less. I think it's about being more sort of in line with the school communications around, the importance of all these things moving forward. And I think the first, there was a message that came out from Winchester Public Schools nursing yesterday to the school, to the parent community, which I think really outlined very beautifully the kind of things that need to be done. And so that was a really good communication. And I think we need to, as a board and as a health department, support that and keep continuing to support that. And honestly, we do have access to some ARPA funding potentially that if we need to ask for and advocate for some more programs as we go into the spring and summer, preparing for the fall. That's why I don't necessarily say, I have the silver bullet answer, but I think we want to work collaboratively with the school department and say, what is it that you would need from us to help you? Is it really setting up more clinics? Is it about better communication? Is it about helping you with your communications? I don't have a solution that I'm saying, let's vote on a solution. It's more about, let's really set up this. And I know you've done it already, but I think we need to sort of now continue this motion forward, because I think things may change and we want to just be ready for the fall.
Yeah, I do think that I'm not sure if you're at the meeting. I know Ruth was there, but when we talked in our last meeting prior to you guys being in the board, one of the big things that we had a conversation with Jen about was we are ramping these efforts down and being ensured that we have less than 24-hour time period to ramp these things back up, being that the contract teaching team has sort of gone away, being that the testing has sort of been ramped down. All of these things have sort of been ramped down appropriately at this point, but making sure that school vacation week, having testing after that, and then if we need to, turn on a dime and ramp these things back up, what is our turnaround time? And I think that we had a good conversation about the fact that we pretty much could go back to full force within a matter of, whatever needs the response has been. And we have waxed and waned over the past couple of years of what the response should be. So, do we have 10 contract tracers working 100 hours a week, 24 hours a day? Yes. Do we need that now? No. So do we have testing twice a week at town hall every day during a surge? Yes. Do we have a mask mandate during a surge? Yes. So I get that the silver bullet isn't out there. Obviously, these are layered mitigation strategies that we all want to have in place. I think for me, right now, the message to the community is to continue being vigilant. And, I think that we can, my daughter is in an age group where she was the December vaccine group because she was 11 at the time, turning 12 in December. So, we had conversations about boosters out to that age group because when they become eligible in May. So how do we bring that out to the community to make sure that that group of kids is getting vaccinated? So I do think that these measures should continue. I'm not 100% sure. And I brainstorm constantly about how we can have a better response or how we could deal with COVID better within this town. But when I look at other towns' responses and I look at what other towns surrounding us have done, we had an unbelievable response. And it has nothing to do with me and it has everything to do with them. We had an unbelievable response to COVID in this town. This health department stood up more things with less staff than I've seen, and they've worked 600 hours a week doing it. So I agree, we can always have better communication. We can always have better collaboration. We can always be working to improve with new minds and new ideas. I love it. There's nothing better than I like a new idea to run with. But other than what we've done, I would have, having lived through this for 30 years, I wonder what else we could do at this point.
I just wonder if, one of the things around sort of, I think, let's talk about the high schools or the middle schoolers. I think there is, there's high vaccine uptake, but it's still not as high as some of our neighboring towns. So if you look at data from Arlington and Lexington, it's actually even higher. I'm curious why there's vaccine hesitancy for those younger groups. And I think as they age into boosters, we're going to be dealing with this in the summer. And so, is it that they're waiting to hear from their pediatricians, or is it that they really just, are too busy to find? So I think we need to, that's why I want to really understand from the schools, whether that's, understanding from the parents why they're not bringing their kids for vaccinations, things like that. I think
Maybe
because
we
I
could
think
survey. I
because
mean,
I
maybe that's a
because I
good
think
survey for the
because I think
schools to send
ultimately, right? If parents are so feeling strongly that they don't want masks in school, that one of the best ways to prevent us from ever getting to that point is going to be in a highly vaccinated, highly tested environment. And I think we just need to again think about that for next fall as much as we want to think about it. And so that's going to
Right.
be this summer. And if it means this summer putting resources in place for that, you know, it takes planning. And I grant that the health department needs to plan, and so we can help guide with that. So I think that's
Yeah.
number one. And then I really do think that with the seniors, with the fourth boosters, and there's going to be a lot of messaging here.
Yeah.
That I think is going to be very important. That I think we're going to need to think through. And so again, nothing sort of that sort of direct that needs a decision today, but I just wanted to have these conversations to continue as we're reviewing the data, because it may be that in 2 to 3 weeks or in 4 weeks, we may see something different. You know, the state data is showing a small little uptick that may go nowhere, but I
Right.
think we just want to just be cognizant of it. And then the last thing I was going to say, you know, I think the other thing is, you know, filtration and building air quality. That's become much more of a topic as well. And I think again, we want to think about how is the health department, how are we as the Board of Health recommending building codes when it comes to sort of these schools, what we're seeing. You know, there's new guidance coming out of the federal government around the kind of air quality measures that need to be done. So I think that's the kind of thing that we need to work with the town more broadly to think through, because this is not going to go away, whether it be this year or next year or the year after. So I think these are the kind of things we just want to make sure that we have consistent policies on.
Thank you, Dr. Sawicki. And yes, I'm in agreement. And it is starting the conversation and putting out on the table, allaying some of the public fears that we are racing into to do something untoward when we're not. We're really here to talk, to get the conversation started, to get us on board here as 2 new members of the board, and to stay vigilant, which Jen more than does, following the data. I think we're done with that topic for today, unless there's more that you'd like to say. We would move on to public comment from here, but please, I don't mean to cut it at all short.
I'm sorry.
I just have one more
Yeah,
comment.
Yeah,
Sort of along the line of COVID response, this is something that we've all talked about, we've all heard about. It's not direct mitigation around COVID, but it's about the mental health challenges. And I just want to make sure that we are remembering that as a Board of Health, we've had a commitment from multiple people who either were in this position or on people who, you know, what we spoke about when we were thinking about this position. And I know we've talked about the Coalition for a Safer Community and what they're doing. I don't want to sort of totally forget that piece, because I know that our community is calling out for it. So I think, again, we want to think about, are there creative ways to use what the Board of Health can do in terms of supporting and developing some strategies around mental health concerns. So I just want to put that out on the record, that I think whether that's creating, again, some communication with the schools, or whether it's related to student mental health and youth mental health, or something with other groups in town. You know, I know that DOT and the Coalition are doing a lot of great work, but I think, again, some of that takes time and money and finance. And so I think we just need to think through sort of how we're thinking about that from a budgetary perspective moving forward.
Mhm.
anything else you'd like to say this?
No.
I'd like to move us to public comment, and at this time then, and we will be continuing certainly our conversation as board members around COVID going forward, as well as a large number of other issues, whether it's regular issues that we need to deal with that have sometimes take a back burner, mental health, and some other pieces that we'll bring forward in the near future. On public comment, I'd like to invite the public first here in the room, and any who may be on the hybrid call here. I'd like to remind folks to please state your name, your address, and to limit your comments to 2 minutes. Each person is requested to speak just once, and the total amount of time for public comment will be limited to 10 minutes. So is there someone here in the room who would like, by the way, could you please, last time we learned that this new technology is not picking up audio from the back of the room. So we've set this seat here for public comment. Anyone who would like to comment in the room, please come forward and sit in this seat, if you would, please.
Can I?
Please, yes, please.
Okay, so I agree with doctor about mental health. You know, like I have a little one.
Excuse me, can you just state your name and
Yeah,
address?
sure. My name
Thank you.
is Yaping Zhang. I live in 51 1 Street, Winchester. Yeah, mental health very important, because little kids, some with the mask, they cannot hear what the other said. and they cannot listen to what the teacher said. I know somebody have to convert to online because of the mask. Okay, I want to present another data. Okay, Pfizer released the data, just shows the 8th week, the week 5, 2022 to like week 8, 2022. Clearly, vaccine group have much more deaths than unvaccinated. I think the town should study not only the town data, Massachusetts data should study Pfizer, like expose the data or release the data to see how many side effects it is. Because those are kids, are our kids, we are parents, we care about their health. Their health is not only, the vaccine has a lot of side effects. This data shows the vaccine can be 10 times as the unvaccinated, the death rate. You guys should explain this to the kids, to the town. This is really released data, newly released data. This is very important. We don't want to someday hear a news saying, okay, some kids died because of blood clot or something. Who will be responsible? Who? You guys or the parents? I'm a parent. I'm really concerned about it.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up. It's
Yeah.
It's 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm done. I just want to talk about this. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for your comments. Another member of the public, please come forward.
My name is Erica Hoffman, 7 Lane Terrace in Winchester. Ruth and Greg, I just wanted to address you saying about your response, the Board of Health and the Department of Public Health response in relation to the schools, because I know you both don't have kids in Winchester Public Schools. I think they've done an amazing job. You know, the pool testing, the testing like the COVID boxes my son brings home for, you know, self-tests. We get an email every week about the, you know, to try and test and recruit people about vaccinations and stuff. But I think it's sort of, now it's more of parent choice on whether they want their kids in the pool testing or to get tested or to be vaccinated or boosted. And especially, I think you're saying that our town is not as good as other towns, and that's probably because it's only 17% effective in the 5 to 11-year-olds. Also, someone in the community last week expressed his concerns at the increase in the number of cases in Winchester Public Schools. This number sounded alarming, but it's only equated to less than 1% in the increase in COVID cases in our Winchester Public School population. We should be following the CDC guidance, and as of today, there's no mention of positivity rate or number of cases in school in their guidance. The CDC guidance today is based on the number of hospitalizations and available hospitalization beds or hospital beds. As of Thursday last week, I'm sure Greg knows that MGH only had 15 inpatients and 3 of these were in the ICU. Tufts Medical had 0 ICU patients. The CDC recommended that people wear well-fitted masks indoors when communities are at high level. At low COVID-19 community levels, individuals can wear a mask by their own choice. There is nowhere in the CDC guidance do they mandate masks that they only recommend. And the CDC guidance is in fact guidance and is not a call for a mandate. It's important that the Board of Health focuses on relevant data and not just any data, given that there are federal and state experts advising the community on what data is relevant to implementing mitigation.
What, we'll certainly give you the grace of wrapping
Okay,
up,
yeah, I'm on
but
my last
yeah,
sentence.
thank you.
And it's not the same metrics as we recommended earlier on in the pandemic. If people are scared of increasing cases, they can continue to exercise their choice in wearing masks to protect themselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And another member of the public who cares to make any comments in the room here. And Regina, is there anyone online? Yes, there's one.
No, but maybe just remind them they need to raise their hand. I don't have
yeah.
anything.
So if there's a large number of people on the hybrid call here, if you would like to raise your hand, please use the raise hand feature, which is at the bottom of your screen, and we will recognize you.
Jian Lu.
Jian Lu, can you go ahead?
Yeah, hi everyone. This is Jen Liu, living at the 217 Highland Ave. I'm also town meeting member. First of all, I would like to thank you all for your public service, and because I'm also as a town meeting member serving the town of Winchester. I just want to make a quick comment on what just the Dr. Sawicki just mentioned. You mentioned like it's going to be very hard to explain the data to the average people in the town. And I just quickly looked up on the US 2020 census. So it looks like in the town of Winchester, the average people, I would say, who obtained the college degrees is over 75% as overall. And if we break down by the age, they're even higher for certain groups. And also, I quickly looked up at the state of Massachusetts, the weekly vaccination report data. If we look at the per capita vaccine rate for the school ages, which I filled down by from 5 years old to 19 years old, the Winchester, Lexington, or Woburn, we actually all, for the people who at least have one dose of vaccination, is over 95%. And then if we look at the fully vaccinated individuals, the percentage is also over 95%. So, I'm not trying to say you get the data wrong. I just would like to say, as a public official, when you make any like a statement, to the Republic, maybe you should bring the data actually to the table, then present the data, the actual accurate data, so we can make informed decision. But again, I would like to thank you all for your service. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Very good. Is there anyone else?
There's
No.
nobody else.
Okay. Very
Sorry.
good. Very good. And thank you so much for your help, Dr. Sawicki.
I actually just wanted to quickly say that I agree with Mrs. Hoffman on what you said about making sure that we have data that matches what our guidance should be. We shouldn't be collecting data just because we can. We should be collecting data that's good data and that we all agree is helpful to the community. And so I think we're in vociferous agreement that just throwing numbers into dashboards is not a helpful thing for anybody. And so that's why I think it's important when we think about what dashboards are there to understand why we're presenting data and why we're collecting it. And I think I fully understand the concern that people can look at different measures, and there are lots of different measures, and different guidance agencies will have very different measures. But I think that's why I think communicating with the schools to understand sort of what data they are able to collect, and if they're only able to collect data that we all think is rubbish, for lack of a better term, then we shouldn't be presenting. Like, we should only be presenting data that we can stand behind. And I worry that sometimes in the pursuit of getting too much data, you start presenting data that is confusing. And so that is my entire raison d'etre for trying to understand how the data dashboards are set.
Or two raised hands.
We didn't close public comment. So we should take.
I apologize, Dr. Sawicki, we did not close public comment yet, and we do have two raised hands. So we certainly will. We are within our 10 minutes minus your comments. So please go ahead with the next person.
Mark Kaplan. Okay. Stephen.
So, I mean, for useful information to the public, I'd like to know how many lives you believe your mask mandate has saved, or maybe hospitalization.
Mr. Kaplan, I'm sorry if I've mispronounced your name, but we need you to state your name, which is up there. I can read it, but your address as well, please.
Okay, my name is Mark Kepline, 11 Palmer Street, Arlington, Mass. So again, I support data, and I'd like to know how many lives you think your mask mandate has saved, or any of the vaccine mandates have saved. And the other data is, as much as the CDC and Pfizer wants to hide it, is that there have been a significant number of adverse effects, especially in children. And the data does not support greater benefit over risk for school children, except maybe in cases where there's many morbidities. In that case, those kids should be vaccinated, but the rest should not have a mandate on them. Another source of data is the MWRA wastewater. That's a leading indicator of disease in the greater Boston area. COVID counts in that water show up about a week before actual cases emerge, when people feel ill and go get tested and the test data is recorded. And now that becomes more problematic as people are doing home testing and fewer PCR tests that are cataloged by the state, and even some of the PCR testing is no longer getting funded. So I would urge you to keep an eye on that data as a leading indicator of when something might be useful. But again, I don't think mask mandates are actually effective, and the data is 95% of the time in communities, they haven't been effective. They produce no difference in results. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And we have one more.
Or two.
Oh, no, that's two, yeah. Stephen Boksansky.
Very good pronunciation. Thank you. It's Steve Boksansky, 11 Willowdale Road. Thanks for having me, and thanks for holding this up. I just really wanted to make a brief comment to support what Mr. Liu had to say. I think the average person can understand the data, and the data that he referenced is being collected by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Public Health. If we can't trust that source, we can't trust anything. So I support what he said. I think we can understand it all, and the data is valid. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are approaching 10 minutes. Do we have one more?
We have one more.
All right, you can put that in.
Michelle McCarthy.
Hi, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, this is Michelle McCarthy. I am a resident at 29 Oxford Street here in Winchester. I'm also a long-term town meeting member. Thank you and welcome to the board, to the new folks. I was really happy to hear, I missed the beginning, I'm sorry about that, but I was happy to hear that the doctor said that he was going to take mental health very seriously. And since I haven't worked with either of you, I'd just like to say that this is really, really important. Our children are very, very happy back at school without masks. We have, I believe it was almost 90% of Winchester public school teachers voted to remove masks. And everyone has just been really happy in the school system for the last few weeks. I know that this is a very difficult time for everybody, and I understand that, but I want to urge both of you to please talk to parents and children who are actually in our school system, who have struggled with the masks. Do either of you have children in the Winchester public school system currently? Can that be addressed? Because I think that's really important.
We accept public comment, but it's not a dialogue here.
Okay, well, maybe you could just let us know, because I would like the facts, because if you do or if you don't, I think that's important and really relevant information. And I would just suggest, maybe I can email you, maybe you can talk to parents who actually have children in the school system and how this is affecting them. I know that there are children with like learning disabilities, and whether it's ADHD or sensory issues, that they've really struggled. And I think that it's important to also look at that as you are addressing all of the important information that you have in front of you. Thank you very much for the time, and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And
There's one more.
I think we are at 10 minutes. What is the feeling of my colleagues? I don't know how many more are going to keep popping up here.
I've never cut it off just because I felt it was important, but I'm happy to support whatever you want to do.
Thank you. Dr. Sawicki, are you okay if we extend it just for a little bit further? There seems to be one more individual here. If you could let them in, thank you.
Dolores McGee.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Hi there. So I'm just,
Excuse me, can you just state your address?
okay, hi, I live in Arlington. I'm on 82 Claremont Ave in Arlington. And I just wanted to make a point that I think that Dr. Sawisky, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, the point he's making about lay people not understanding data, I think that's extremely arrogant and condescending. And I also think that to suggest that Winchester is just some isolated, compartmentalized community that nobody has a right to have a comment on because they don't have the right zip code is also extremely arrogant. We live in towns that are very close. We have friends, family members, businesses, restaurants. We support each other. And for people who don't agree with mask mandates and maybe like this complete vaccine hysteria, we feel this not because we're following misinformation or we've been misled. We feel this for reasons that are important to us. And if we feel like human rights violations are being made across the state or the country, et cetera, we're not gonna let a town line stop us from trying to interrupt things like that. So I would really like it if you would stop acting like, unless you have a Winchester zip code, you don't have a right to speak on matters that are of this magnitude. We in Arlington welcome people, we welcome comments, we welcome all sorts of things in this town. And I just think for you to suggest that points and people's opinions and concerns are not valid because they don't live in Winchester is extremely restrictive, and it really, it reveals a lot about your mentality that I think is very unfavorable. So thank you very much. I hope everybody does their best here to serve individuals and the community.
Thank you for your comments. And with that, we close public comments. All right.
That was rude.
I'd just like to say one thing. I do
Yes.
think that I've made a lot of off the cuff comments in a meeting, a public meeting. So I don't think you mentioned anybody, and I don't think that you were being offensive in what you said. So I'm sorry that that got misconstrued. And I think that you have a wealth of knowledge and should be respected in your opinion. So I don't want you to get bashed online and not be supported. So I just, you know, I believe me, I've misspoke 1,000 times and I've been held to the fire on it. So I just want to say that I think that what you said was completely appropriate and reasonable, and it just, I think got taken a little bit out of context.
Thank you, Maureen. I just want to quickly say two things. One is just, again, for the record, my concern around data is not what the DPH is sending to us as a town. I think that is obviously coming from DPH. My concern, and as it's been raised by multiple members in the community, is understanding what the school data is, because that's not coming from DPH. And so I think that's something that I think we can all learn and understand whether that's a right type of data to be collecting in schools, and is it being reported in the way that is understandable to people who have kids in the schools. Right. So I think that has nothing to do with maligning any type of data. So I want to make very clear about that. I also want to be very clear that I think whether or not we talk about policies in schools should have nothing to do with whether we have a child in the schools. We all work in the community. We all know people and speak to people who have children in schools, whether they be in the public schools here or in other schools. Some people that we have children that are too young to be in the public schools, and so that does not in any way take away our authority and our ability to think about and work with the school system. And I think for a comment to be made that I don't understand what parents go through, as someone who's a pediatrician who's devoted his entire career to taking care of kids and families, for someone to say that I do not understand what parents are going through just because they don't have a kid in the Winchester public schools is absolutely ridiculous. And I know it's not a forum to defend myself, but I appreciate, Maureen, your support in telling me that I shouldn't be subject to these kind of comments during a meeting. And lastly, in no way am I condescending to say that people don't understand data, but it is very important to know that we have a job to explain data to people, and that's our job as public servants. And we need to then make sure that we are explaining it in a way that actually everybody can explain. And I just think that it's important to recognize that, that's why we have to be very careful about how data is shown and explained, because we want to make sure people understand it and not rely on sort of some on paper what people are what their degree is or what the population is. We want to be able to explain it so a high schooler can understand it. data, so that our elementary school students can understand the data, that parents of any kind of means can understand the data. That's our job. That's our role as public servants. And I don't think that's condescending for me to say that the data can be explained in a more straightforward.
Yeah, I would say that from my standpoint, I believe that what we have done as a board has released the most up-to-date data that we have our hands on. I understand that the complications with the new school dashboard can be confusing at some, but truly all they're giving is a case count, and that's all they're attempting to give as a case count, right? So that people can get an understanding of what the case count in the schools is. Now, putting that in context of the fact that it's, less than however many, but if you log on and see that there's 10 cases in Ambrose, getting context around, is that across 10 classrooms? Is it all in one classroom? Is it all, is it in school spread, out of school spread? I think that is more information that could be done by the school dashboard. But I also think it's a work in progress that they've just sort of separated from the town dashboard. And in terms of just overall, when I hear things, vaccines work, vaccines have worked, vaccines have protected populations for years. If people have questions about vaccines or anything that was raised on this comment, they should speak to their primary care physicians or anyone else about vaccines, because there is a lot of vaccine misinformation out there. And the second thing is masks do work. Masks are a layered mitigation standard, and I think that everybody gets torn down to mask mandates. And I think that there's a lot more complexity to how to deal with COVID than just mask mandates and masks. And I think that that's what I've been asking for a year now. And a lot of what has happened has gotten lost in the noise. And so I understand that, people, making things clear has been sort of my intention since December. So I think that from our perspective, though, the data that we give out is good, solid data. I mean, we have a handle on our numbers. I agree that the school dashboard could be better, but I also think it's hard to contextualize that data because it's self-reported. It's not coming from a state source. It's not, there's a lot that goes into it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments on there. And it is really helpful to hear certain things stated unequivocally. Vaccinations work, masks work, and that you have been working hard in getting that data out. And I might say, Dr. Sawicki, it is as much not so much about clarifying or explaining data, but in keeping our ears to the ground and keeping the public informed, certainly, as well as explaining the data. But choosing, keeping our ears to the ground and bringing forward data in time and to the public, as well.
Can I ask one question, just as a person who's been on this board?
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a piece of data that you weren't getting from these meetings? Or when you are listening,
No,
just as a
I
person?
don't think that, I think the town-wide data is totally appropriate and
Yeah.
been done well. To me, again, the concern has been raised and it's been raised to us more recently around the data around the schools. That's
Okay,
where
no.
the big concern is, and I think we can do better.
Yeah, totally. I'm just asking for myself because
Yeah.
obviously I'm enmeshed in this.
It's
and it's
not,
hard.
no, it's
to see.
not, the DPH town data is, there's a million ways you can display it. If you look at every town.
Right,
in
they
the
all do it
surrounding community,
differently.
They all do it a little bit
Right.
differently. And so it's about, thinking about trends, thinking about where things have gone. I mean, that to me is not the concern. The concern really has been, and it's been right now, thinking about what parents are concerned about, which is what they're hearing, right?
Right.
They're hearing things in their classrooms, or they're hearing things from their friends or from their sports teams about, oh, so-and-so I heard tested positive, or I heard there was a case in their classroom. And then we didn't hear about it until 5 days later. But then how come the dashboard went from 20 cases to 30 cases overnight? And then no one explained that.
Yeah.
And that to me is something I think we can work with the school system to make better.
Yeah.
All right, is there anything more to be discussed today? I think that was a very helpful and robust conversation. And I'd like to look for a motion to adjourn at this time.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call vote, Dr. Sawicki.
Aye.
Ms. Pimentel. Aye. And Mr. Markey. Aye. Thank you all.